So that and even more, I think, is in our fascinating and difficult but still interesting and complex landscape. I think that there's a brief, it's one of the a series of brief documentary, or I will call also a kind of brief books that, visual books that he composes. It's able to represent the complexity of our landscape, and those are continuously transforming while we are talking here, and how many different scales and elements and the heterogeneity of characters and identities that are simultaneously present and acting and interacting in our space while we move or while we design. So that's all the, those are, I think, all, and there is even more than that, that we have to deal with when we are thinking and designing at the scale of a city, which now is more and more involved with the scale of the territory in which cities are located and in which cities are able to interact. And this is a kind of a combination of two main kind of environment, the natural one and the cultural one, that I try to kind of synthesize in this brief list of elements which characterize both of them. The natural environment, so geology, geography, topography, ecology, and we can add hydrology and other specific elements, and cultural environment, which are the way we transform those lands to make that productive, urban settlements, social, political, economic issues, infrastructural networks. A series of, I in some way try to organize this conversation with you in a way that it's a sort of theatrical presentation of it. So this is the prologue of the first act, the opening, right? So our territories and our geographies, the physicality of our geography has been characterized and deformed from by a series of processes, often processes related to needs of look for resources, natural resources, or trade around the world. Those have shaped and reshaped continuously our territories and have created different levels of relationship among those territories, deforming also the structure of the way we perceive the space and we move through the space. And with this different way of connection or connectivity, the geography has changed also because of the different means of transportation that we use, which create that collapsing between time and space that we were talking before, and that overlapping of dimension that while one is shrinking, the spatial one, the other one, while one is shrinking, the time one, the other one is growing, which is the spatial one. So the contraction of time and the extension of space has been contemporarily developing and growing. So we have also immaterial kind of connection and system of mobility, virtual movement, the movement of thoughts, of technology, of our movement, the movement of ideology and of experiences. We are in some way here, and you were, when you were in New York, part of those, for the one of you who were there, part of those exchange of virtual things. You are physically there, but it's your ideas, your thoughts, your understanding of the space you move in and the way you act in that space that is also virtually going to contaminate mutually those places where you are happen to work by. But then we have also other kind of movements and other kind of needs connected to issues that now become more and more important and pressing at global scale, not only in New York, because we can analyze what happened in New York with Sandy or what happened in New Orleans or what happened in Haiti as kind of sort of paradigmatic tragedy or natural, which we could have forecast or not, but anyway, those are paradigmatic for a situation which is extended to all over the world, as the map of the flooding zone all over the world shows. So we have black, which it's the water, so I have some black, but you see the background is white. Black into the major kind of lower area, into the continent where we are used to see cities, where we now see cities. As well, we can see from the global warming effect that the raise of the temperature is creating and reshaping a new kind of geography and is opening and closing new place to life, perhaps. Those are elements which are going to interact with, and those are elements which are going to define the way we will move, or we are already moving. And a brief intermission just to understand exactly what is, and since my background is, my culture is Italian, and my background is Italian, so I have to go to philosophy and literature all the time. I feel better in some way. So I try to understand, and I think it's important for all of us trying to understand the meaning of the word we use and kind of the etymology of those words and the philosophical and the literary background of this one. So what is the landscape? We call this mysterious landscape and urban landscape and landscape urbanism, and we heard about this landscape every time and everywhere today. Everything is landscape. There is also, also a title of a book, Everything is Landscape. So the landscape is mainly the shape that the environment gives to the territory. But then, okay, what is the territory? So dictionary, territory, landscape, space, what are those elements? So there is a sort of, I try to simplify in this chart a quantity of information and a quantity of study pretty articulated, but in some way we have a perceptual and aesthetic nature of the landscape, an historic and a geographic nature of the landscape, and an ecological natural landscape. And each one of them, as you can see, are related to specific content and have specific forms and have specific tools to express themselves. So the perceptual aesthetic nature value of the landscape is a synthesis of the image and sensory. So are the visual values, so are pretty individual. Each one of us has his own in relation to his own personal experience, not only to his own cultural background. Then there is an historic and geographic value of meaning of the landscape, which deals with the synthesis of territory and environment. And you can see the spatial meaning and the biological meaning of both of these words. So it's a pretty articulated and difficult sea we have to move through if we try to understand what is this landscape. And I don't think that this chart is complete or absolutely covers all the characteristics, but just try to simplify those. So the prima vicenda, the further acts, the second act of this. So we define, and I'm glad that we see again Serlio tonight. And, but I'm trying to, it's interesting because, yes, I believe that we need to understand the differences and why we need to go back to Serlio and how we can use Serlio to move forward and perhaps to try to understand what is around us and why we are where we are. Anyway, this is kind of an attempt to describe the main steps of our understanding of the city and how easy it was for these people in the 1500 and 1600 to understand what city was, because it was clear. City was whatever was inside the wall, and outside the wall there was productive land and then wildness and danger and then the mysterious nature, right? So pretty easy for them. They didn't have a landscape which was completely urbanized, which was completely covered by human traces and by infrastructural elements or built elements. So it was easy to understand this dichotomy, this dualism between what is inside, what is urban, and what is urban is not. While today, I mean, it's pretty difficult because those thresholds are more and more fragile and ambiguous, and we cannot really see where is Milan and where is Milan is not. We are in Rubattino, we have the feeling that we know that we are in Milan. We are in some place that is not, of course, the center of Milan, is not the open countryside, but is a part of that. And if we go towards the open countryside, where is that? I mean, we don't see the threshold of that. We keep seeing buildings, we keep seeing streets, we keep seeing industries, we keep seeing a mixture of productive land and residual places, and it's all kind of in the realm of the human being in some way. So I'm trying to say from that vision, the 1500, 1600, to the modern vision, when we start thinking of metropolis, of this idea of a city which extends behind those walls and is diffused in a territory, and still it's, for the modern society and for the modern time, it's a system of an understandable entity within a background. It's an object within a field. Still, the city, as much as big it was still recognizable in its boundary for all the beginning of the century, which allows those architects like Gregotti in this case, or Le Corbusier, to design structures which were trying to read the geography of the place, and which were trying to work with that geography to underline some aspect of that, or to also contrast some of those aspects, as you can see in this design proposal, one of which the University of Reggio Calabria has been realized, even though not in a total extension. But anyway, it's still clear that there is a countryside, there is an open space, there is a topography that deals with the project, and the topography becomes, and the geographic dimension of becomes part of the matter of architecture, which is very important. You have to think at the same time where Gregotti was writing the first kind of draft of what will be the territorio dell'architettura, the territory of architecture. In the same time, in the 64, before the book, he was writing essays about the geographical dimension of architecture and the needs for the architect to understand topography, understand system, natural system, to be able to engage those in the formal structure of architecture and to be able to rewrite the geography, right? The geography is writing is in some way on and with the gas, the earth. So our landscape are becoming much more complex, and we can see those two images belonging to the same city, and we see several of these of cases like this one. Like Nördinglis, Dutch urbanist, wrote, "The city as a demonstrable entity is finished. This is a collage of fragments, a vast panorama such as in a patchwork. Within this surface, which is composed from several elements, each one of us is going to build his own city." So the personal dimension of our landscape is going to be a sort of catalyzer of all of these different and also contrasting and also absurd realities, especially if you think that in some of these places, like on your right side, other forces are included, which are forces which belong to political issues, to military issues, which are also shaping our land, our cities as well. The green zone, the red zone, have you heard about that during the almost like every day and during the news? Those are our landscape. The sprawl, the condensed, and the very layered system. It's a layered system still. It's not a laminated, it's the one of the infrastructure, because each one it's running in its independent way and going in its independent direction, while our landscape seems to be homogeneously covered by this carpet of light, which is the sprawl, which it's possible because of the street and because of the infrastructural system. So the two things are necessary to each other. And then we work in these spaces where we have the kind of crashing point, the friction, the one that Antonella likes, between two different dimensions: natural dimension, built dimensions, infrastructure that meets nature, a city which is not a city anymore, or a land which is not a city still. So there is this kind of working on the threshold area, which open to fertile possibility for architects to think and develop design idea. And in these systems, the scale is changed, and elements in this scale are more extended. So we have areas which are extended to a regional boundaries that are involving cities and agricultural productive lands and residual lands, and this way of organizing these macro models of landscape through the model of the Desakota and to the model of a regional system which integrates scales, integrates needs, and integrates hierarchies linked in a specific networked way. Then we are going to move towards that. We are working, and we have been working in the past 20 years at least, since 97, I think, 96, in this kind of landscape scale. Antonia knows well about that, right? About the Waldheim book about landscape architecture, where we are moving towards an idea of instead than identifiable systems and connected system in a scale of mixed system that work holistically together but that doesn't mean that they work in a kind of pacific way or in a kind of nice and quiet way. They always often work in a very contrasting and hard and tough way. So we work in the scale where we are thinking about shrinking and growing city simultaneously. We are thinking about how the territories related to this city has changed, how system of circulation are changed, how system of production has changed, how our these elements, which are, we keep saying are global, but they are affecting our local constantly. And we cannot say that one, I'm not a reactionary at all. I think that we need to think global. I don't want to say not local, but I said it. Anyway, we need globality, and we need to look to ourselves and to our localism through that lens, as well as we need to look to the global lens, to our local identity, to our kind of a perceivable and understandable scale. We cannot imagine and talk about spaces which are far away from us and from our dimension. At the end of the day, our space is the space we move through, we walk through, we relate to, we look at, and this is our way of experiencing the space. But we can act in this space in a more conscious way if we have an understanding of the phenomenon and effect, and we can understand what is around us at the local scale, because perhaps that's an effect, a reaction of something happening in the global ones. You read about urban metabolism, and was an interesting topic. We worked for several kind of few years here, and we are still working and evolving in a different way, because that's since it's a metabolism keeps evolving and changing. And but we identified in our we were working on this European research, and we identified this way, trying to understand that metabolism is something that it's organic but is applicable to cities or to territorial phenomena as well. And so it's something that is we are going to consider when we work at the scale of the building as well when we work in the scale of the entire city. And it's a way of simplify the things, but it's also a way of find a key to enter into the issues and try to clarify what is the process we can apply, because it's always a matter of process and metabolism, and cities are always processes, are always art that we can understand in the time. It's not something fixed in one moment. Those are in the second vicenda, nella vicenda seconda, something like that we can find in several cases, and some of those cases are in New York and some other around the world, but as our territories are changing, our infrastructure is changing, our topography is changing because of what we do with it. And this is a fresh kill park, but West State just are going to finish soon the Governor's Island Park, and the strategy is almost the same of this one. I mean, this was a garbage kind of collection point in Staten Island that was left to its life for a long time, and then they decided to change it and to transform. They decided to change it to transform it in a very interesting landscape project where the kind of post landscape, post of what? This landscape was created and generated by the presence of something big close to that, a big apple that produced a big garbage here, and that the life on Manhattan was possible because places like this were around, or they became like this because because of the kind of fast process of growth of Manhattan. But anyway, those places around, from being neglected and drawscape, they become for us as urban designer, landscape urbanist, they became a kind of an opportunity to develop new areas and to transform in a more sustainable places this reality that were almost like forgotten from the map of the city. So from a collection of garbage to a infrastructural element that was in the 30s in the city and working perfectly to serve all the waterfront on the west side of Manhattan along the Hudson River. But then when the system of production and distribution changed, it didn't leave only empty the waterfront itself, but it left empty those infrastructural elements that was serving that waterfront. So the Hudson River has completely dramatically changed, as I think all of you know, in the past 40 years. And other structure like the High Line has been changing as well, and they are going to finish the last piece soon. And it's a big project. It's a linear park, transformed in a linear park. We can recognize precedent to this in Paris, in the boulevard in Paris. The name doesn't come to my mind now, but there is a similar example. The Promenade Plantée in Paris, and that was before this, but for some way less advertised because it's not Hudson River, and because it didn't cost millions and millions of dollars, and because that is not facing fancy and rich buildings, but it's just a piece of the city integrated with the city as well. So it's interesting, great idea, transforming infrastructure instead than demolishing it and giving place to real estate, keeping that and giving place to real estate anyway, because the gentrification process that this project generated is pretty huge. A lot of enterprises and a lot of people who were renting or living in those spaces were forced to leave because the prices raised tremendously after the finish. But I'm not saying the bad things, I'm just saying there is always a kind of duality of phenomena. Everybody is thinking the island is great, it's beautiful, but you cannot run on the island, you cannot take your dog on the island, you cannot go on the island behind midnight. You can run on the Hudson River, you can be with your dog on the Hudson River, you can run in the early morning. There is not a closure time unless there is some phenomena like Sandy, which forced the Hudson River Park to close for almost 4 months. But anyway, it's a great project, but there is some price to pay. The soul of that part of New York is changed because of that. And still there are people enjoying it, and mostly tourists. And so good for the island. There are other cases less expensive than that and less fancy that have been always used and reused in a very kind of performative ways, like the Romho Market in Songkram, which works like a market but is also a railway. So when the train comes, the market is rolled and unrolled when the train leaves. It's a kind of a performative space, which it's an infrastructural space, but it's also a social space, a trade space, and it's also a performative space without expanding too much. And it's a dangerous space, but the train doesn't go too fast when it crosses this area. It's not our Freccia Bianca, anyway. Other example, like, that we have, for example, in Valencia, that I had the chance of visiting again this summer, and was something amazing. I mean, everyone is using this park. The park has become a big kind of land of the city. Is rich of activities. I will say that are more interesting the outdoor activities than the indoor activities with those Calatrava buildings. But anyway, the outdoor activities are pretty well used, and it became a very interesting linear element of the city, and was possible thanks to the big engineering work, just shifting and moving the path of the river outside the city to avoid flooding, because in the 60s there was a big flooding and people died, and they decided after that to open this process that took something like 20 years to be end, like the island is taking several years, because the point of this project, the scale of them and elements connected to that at the territorial scale are so important that you cannot imagine of realizing this project in one step. You have to plan their sequence, the sequence of their growth and the sequence of their realization in a long span time. This can be considered one of the first projects of reuse of industrial, post-industrial structure in a kind of, in this case, in a leisure park. But we are trying to say perhaps we can use our post-industrial spaces, which are often on the waterfront, like all around New York, and from New York I mean Brooklyn, Queens, and Manhattan. We can use those not only like a leisure places. Are there perhaps some possibilities to use those still as a productive and to save something of the memory of their past, instead of being just leisure and again real estate operation like Bloomberg did in New York for years, transforming completely the waterfront of the city, which is great. Instead of being abandoned, instead of being dangerous and unsafe, now it's used and people can enjoy those places. But still, again, why not having creating some possibilities for people working and still work on a level of productivities of this place? I think this is a big a kind of chance that we have in the future, working with this, which still we have a lot in big scale of this post-industrial place, trying to introduce some element which is productive, which productive doesn't mean heavy industry. It's a kind of industry that could be related to the light system and could be related with the productivity of the environment as well. This was an interesting exhibition at MoMA, rehousing the American dream, and was related to the foreclosed cities, which was this has been, and it still has a big problem in US, and I think not only in US, of those cities collapsed because of their financial problem. And so there is a kind of an attempt to try to revitalize, to reintegrate, to reform their life, reintroducing element that could be a catalyzer or attraction of potential investments and of potential way of reusing what is there without being unsustainable, spending all of the resources to destroy what is there. And this is one of the Jenga project, which I found very interesting, Cicero, which opens also to kind of space which are oriented to a specific kind of ethnicity, a specific kind of mixed population, let's say. Lots of those projects are going on, and if you look to the project, to the documentary Urbanized, you will have a series of these projects in less known areas and related to kind of fast growing or informal growing cities and all over the South America or in Africa. This is one in Venezuela, for example. And those are projects which are organized and managed by local communities with the help of schools or University of Landscape Architecture, and so are very interesting because are engaging young mind and trying to not to dramatically change the nature of a place, but to make that place, the transformation of that place being more coherent with the uses and the needs of the people. So sometimes just building a path can change dramatically the way we move through a place and the possibilities that we have to reinventing that place as well. Some other project, this one related another in the same exhibition, but another team, the Work AC, proposed this idea for the nature city, one different, another one of the foreclosing city, where the city becomes almost a sort of a machine which operates at a landscape scale and reintegrates natural element, water, green, productivity, sustainable means of transformation, all together in a system where they work in a kind of in a possible symbiotic way with the built system, and that trying to be really sustainable, because a kind of an environmental sustainability could perhaps sometime not mean a kind of a financial sustainability or a social sustainability or a spatial sustainability. Building like the new Morphosis Cooper Union building in New York, for example, it's environmentally sustainable, it's a smart building, but financially brought the school to bankrupt. So the sustainability we have to evaluate, consider different aspects, not only the environmental one. And I think those proposals from Amalia Andros from Work AC, for example, are the ones that are trying to integrate those aspects and try always to use, they have also composting that produce heat, and this heat is used to heat the pool that the people is using. So there is a way of thinking in a kind of a systemic way, that where everything is used, reused to produce something else or to activate some other process. It's, and that's, I think, it's the real way of being sustainable, where those strategies are able to create and recreate continuously conditions for life. I will show you some example of some of the projects that some of my students did, and in some of those areas, here you can see the flood zones of New York and New Jersey, and as you can see, all the JFK, the harbor, and which is the one in the bottom, you know, this guy here is going to be under the water, and it was marshlands as well, it still is in part, and part of the Red Hook and Gowanus Canal. I saw some of your students, Antonella, is working on the Gowanus Canal still, and then all the part of the East River and the Lower Manhattan here, of course New Jersey, but that's New Jersey, and then Staten Island, and what about Staten Island? But that's Staten Island. So, but we can see it's dramatic, and that's part of that responsibility that we have. We cannot stop perhaps this. We can try to work with it, and when we design, perhaps if we design, or if we imagine to have an housing, we will perhaps in those places put the housing at least at the second floor, not at the first one, right? So, and so this is the map of some of the project, and then I will show briefly some of the students perhaps will recognize those. Where is Alex? Alex, I think this was, you're here, right? No? Anyway, this is John, and this is for the lower side of Manhattan, when he was trying to say, okay, there were different approaches. After Sandy, there were all this, for months there were meetings and exhibitions, and I was part of some of those meetings at exhibition, try to see what is the future of the city. And the AIA, the Architectural Association of New York, organized those things, a workshop with, and what was interesting in those workshops had kind of a multidisciplinary presence. So we have engineering and landscape architect and economists working all together for weeks trying to understand what could be the future. Should we build a high wall against the water, or should we be more kind of let the water come in and trying to direct one in the way we can and trying to collect and perhaps reuse. I think this second one was the approach that was strongly recommended and that we strongly proposed and was exhibited also at AIA in New York, and it was an interesting way. So we need to be collaborative. We need to cross disciplines and to cross expertise and to cross approaches in dealing with these issues, because we are not botanical, we are not a water engineer, we don't know a lot. We can understand something, try to do what we can as architect, because at the end we are architects. So, but this collaborative work which can help us to understand what is our contribution towards a specific direction and what is what we can take from those expertise to make this project working better or resisting longer, perhaps, or perhaps designing their hand as well and their recycling. So those are some, as you can see here, was a more kind of permeable and marshland approach. This idea of the water, trying to deal with the flooding, creating these absorbing patches and canalizing the water, and that becomes a landscape. Another approach was a berm, a wall, a sort of soft wall. This approach was trying to see, okay, let's try to see if we can work with these fingers of solid platform that can raise if the water raises without getting flowed, and perhaps they can also be a collector of water, even though also because the south side of Manhattan, Lower East Side, had this nature of being the place where all agricultural elements were arriving, fish was grown, I mean, oyster were grown in this area. So try to understand if and how what we call the eco world can help in dealing with this phenomena. If we can, by locating in a specific and strategic way, which we can understand only if as architects we analyze the big scale of the issue, the territorial scale of the issue. If we locating in a strategic way a specific kind of natural or semi-natural strategy, we can avoid, or we can in some way smooth down the effect of these phenomena which are going to happen again. We cannot stop them. In other cases, it's more apocalyptic way. You can embrace the future and say, okay, this is the future. This will be under the water. Let's try to see how we can design it, where we can replace people and activities and life which was going on the water before, on the land before, and that now is covered by water. So that's another way of thinking about a possible performable future. Or thinking again about a system of reusing water and reusing kind of waste through the water to recycle element and to produce from this recycled element. In this case, one of the thesis students was working on the Gowanus Canal, assuming that the flooding process was already on, and then trying to understand what to do environmentally, but also as architect in terms of the urban growth of this area because of that, and after this phenomena, trying to understand what to save and how to save and what it's possible to do, engaging, as you can see in the water, engaging the water and the overflowing water in a process of production and recycling. In this case, she was collecting plastic and paper, using the water to move the machine, to trim down the plastic and producing from that fabrics, and then selling the product realized with those fabrics. So it's a systemic way of thinking, not only in terms of designing the spaces, but also in terms of programming how they work in a systemic way. Some other example of urban farming, of embracing the water, canalizing the water, creates this cistern to cleanse the water through natural elements and reuse for the housing system, and with a connection to the main transportation hub, which are fundamental. Just to recent competition I took part to, and this is a proposal for the waterfront of Detroit, which is an amazing city. I will suggest you to visit it. Very, very fascinating for architects and so inspiring. And this was a proposal instead having, now instead of this water system, I just forgot to put the image of what is there now. There is a kind of a concrete platform with a fountain and a plaza, which it's completely empty. Nobody goes there. Really, nobody goes in the downtown Detroit anymore since I think 70. But the proposal is try to transform this area, which is on the lake, transform this area in a marshland area and in a sort of natural and also leisure system with canoeing and processes, and the big concrete element and the problem of the CO2 of this area is in some way managed to the creation of this. They were asking for an open space for concert and gathering and all these activities. So we thought, why not having a kind of a sloped green element when people can gather and have a concert outdoor, and that stage is over here. So there is a marsh and the water comes in here. The green slopes up here and allows to have a big parking lot underneath this area. And CO2 produced from the car, there is a big tunnel here going all the way and going up on this way to the other side on Canada. So through the CO2 produced from this parking lot and from the tunnel is captured, canalized, and driven to this algae system, which produce energy and oil from that CO2. And that energy is used for the public transportation system of the city. So it's a way, again, to think system in terms of a system, but also to think that we can, with our project, and it's urban scale, we can rethink the natural system. We can rethink a way of connecting the city structure with a new way of living the city structure. And another one in New York, which we closed a few months ago, and then for the Queensway, which is an abandoned rail elevated line. Sometimes elevated in some part, and then it's sunk in other parts, and is connecting all the way north to south through the Queens, and is cutting the Queens. So there are just 1-2 trains a month going on this railway track. For the rest of the time is almost always abandoned, and this creates a huge problem for the neighbors. So we thought, instead of creating a nice kind of precious living room like the island, let's transform this in a farmland, in a elevated farming system, where you can have crops and you can grow stuff on top, and you have all these areas which are parking lots, which are kind of parking area, and they work in this way. So they have parking underneath, and they have greenhouse on top. So there is a kind of continuity, and underneath this area you sell the product that you produce, or you work on that. There are kind of restaurants and other areas, schools, so that becomes also an educational process. How do you use this product to produce food, and the water connected there is reused to water the plants. So the urban section that this requires is not just the section of the building, is the building rooted into the ground and rooted in a bigger territorial system, which involves the entire cities and the entire existing industrial element, the housing system, so a kind of the infrastructural connection. There is a kind of multi-layered, or I will say in this case, multi-laminate system, which means that there are cross-vertical connection and not just overlapping of elements. And this is one of possibilities. We can be resilient, or we can embrace the transition theories, whatever we want. But we have to try to understand that we have to deal with this, and it's our responsibility, the future that we are living on. Especially, it's your responsibility. Thank you.